Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's we'll be doing a four-wheel drive comparison with the new Toyota Land Cruiser and the new Toyota 4Runner. A lot of people are wanting to see if the full-time four-wheel drive system of the Land Cruiser is that much better than the part-time four-wheel drive system with the new 4Runner. So let's figure it out in today's video. Before we get into this video, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to the Orem Toyota for giving me some time with this 4Runner. I'll include a link to their website in the description down below. Also include a link to my car buying guide. Let's get into it. I haven't done a video like this before, and the reason why I didn't do a walk-around comparison, by the way, is this is the Tier D Sport. That's a first edition. They're not really all that comparable, and I've already done a couple of walk-around comparisons between the two vehicles. So right now we're in two-wheel drive high, and I just want to test out the turning radius here. So this will give me at least an idea of how that feels. I know I'm not technically doing a I can't talk full circle here. This might be able to, I might just not have enough space here in the parking lot to do a full circle. But I mean, it's not bad. It's pretty typical for a truck. We'll see how that compares to the Torsen. Now what I'll do here is, we're obviously not going to be, oops, meant to do high. We're not going to be doing four-wheel drive low because we're not off-road. But yeah, now we've got it in high. Okay, that limits it quite a bit. So it's, I don't think it's fully locked out. Let's see, let's do a little bit of reverse. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Oh, no, it's still kicking me a little bit. So it's doing the typical thing that vehicles do when you have them in four-wheel high, where you lose quite a bit of turning radius and you don't really have it lock to turn. So pretty typical there. Now we're going to pop it back into two-wheel drive. We'll see how long that takes to get into two-wheel drive. Oh, it's pretty quick. So it's a pretty quick system, but it does the normal thing that you expect with a traditional two-speed two-wheel drive transfer case. Which, again, the 4Runner is supposed to be a more simplistic vehicle, so that is definitely a more simplistic driveline setup. And so from my perspective, what that really looks like is you use the four-wheel drive in this only when you need to, right? And, you know, probably not in a super tight situation. I guess we'll also talk about how the ride is between both of them and the steering and everything. This little short comparison. New 4Runner drives really well. It's more luxe compared to before, those of you that are wondering. And because this is a two-wheel drive vehicle, right? You can have it in two-wheel drive. The steering kind of has a little bit of vagueness on center. It's terrible, but there's a little bit. And the biggest thing that I will note is in two-wheel drive, it feels like it is pretty sharp. Again, coming back up, I'll pop it into 4 high, and we'll see kind of how that feels. Now, something to note, there is a bunch of different suspension options for the 4Runner. You've got the SR5, and then you have the Tier D Sport, which this one is. And the Tier D Sport, things are tuned a little bit different, but it has basically the same suspension as an SR5. And then you have the Tier D Off-Road, which has the Bilstein shocks. And then you have the Platinum, which has the, I can't remember the name of it. But the shocks, they basically kind of, they have levels of adjustment. And then you've got the Trail Hunter, which has the Old Man Emu. And then you've got the Pro, which has the Fox shocks. So suffice to say, there are a ton of different suspension options for the new 4Runner. Which means that this comparison is going to be not that great. The Land Cruiser, it's like pretty standardized, but the 4Runner, there's so much. So with this, I should be able to do it on the fly to 4 high. So just shift it over to 4 high. It's still blinking. Still blinking. Okay, so it took a minute. So if you're in like a situation where you all of a sudden get stuck, you might have to sit there for a minute and just kind of, you know, maybe you have to reverse a little bit, or just kind of, again, it seems like it's a more old school system where it just takes its time. But in 4-wheel drive high, I mean, I can feel the front end gripping. The steering already feels heavier, just like what you'd expect a vehicle to feel like when you're in 4-wheel drive high. But it doesn't really, again, in this where it's not like a tight turning situation, it doesn't really feel bad with the drive. It doesn't feel like it drives any worse. Now, obviously, you're going to lose a lot of fuel economy. But in the Land Cruiser, right, you're just going to innately get worse fuel. That's, if you're wondering, one of the biggest reasons why the 4Runner has better fuel economy than the Land Cruiser, when you compare hybrid to hybrid, is the fact that you can decouple the front end fully. Whereas the Land Cruiser, all-wheel drive, you're always going to use up a little bit more gas because you're turning more wheels. But it actually doesn't drive bad in 4-wheel drive high. Honestly, it's again, the biggest problem is just those tight turns in 4-wheel drive high. So, but that's something that's just been a thing forever. Like, here is fine. Like, look at that, just fine. Just when you go full crank, that, and we'll see after I've gone a little bit, had the 4-wheel drive system on for a minute. Let's see if it still kind of does a little bit of jiggy stuff. Let's see here. Yeah, see, here, it doesn't like that. But if I have it here, it's fine. It's not annoyed. You just can't really go lock to lock in 4-wheel drive high with an kind of like an old school system like this. I'm just making sure I get it out of 4-wheel high before we park it. Let's pop in the Land Cruiser. Okay, Land Cruiser. So I'm in 4-wheel high currently, and this is the thing about the Land Cruiser is this is kind of like an all-wheel drive in a way, but it's also not. I do have a center locker. That will be the equivalent of that 4Runner being in 4-wheel high, but without the center diff locked, just kind of seeing the turning radius, honestly, this doesn't feel like it's that much. Of course, I parked the 4Runner on the way, but just kind of cranking it all the way, it doesn't feel like it actually turns that much worse than the 4Runner in 2-wheel drive. It's, I would say, perceivably a little bit. And I mean, it'd be good to look up the specs, but it seems like it's a little bit worse, but it's not that much worse. So we'll lock the center diff. That'll be the equivalent of the 4Runner in 4-wheel high. So it's just like the 4Runner is kind of dragging a little bit with the center diff locked. Just like what the 4Runner was doing in 4-wheel high versus 2-wheel drive. But it's not nearly as bad. Like, I can actually crank it all the way, whereas the 4Runner I have to be here. Like, and this is happier here, but I can crank it more. So interesting with the difference there. Now the center diff, I just pressed the button to unlock it. It is taking a while. There we go. It's taking a second to unlock, but I'm interested to see how the seats feel on the TRD Pro. Man, you are turning wide, dude. Wow. Anyways, I'm interested to see how the seats feel in the TRD Pro and the Trail Hunter. I will say these, I've been in a 4Runner off-road premium, and the Land Cruiser seats are definitely more comfortable overall. So that is a thing. In terms of ride quality overall, I wouldn't say the Land Cruiser is any more comfortable per se compared to that TRD Sport, on road at least. Off-road is going to be a completely different story, because this has a stabilizer bar disconnect. A lot of the 4Runners are not going to come with that. You've got to go up in package, or you got to get it as an option like on a TRD off-road. But on-road at least, yeah, they both, I mean, they're both comfortable enough that one car or the other, I don't really have a preference. Now, I will note, I've got aftermarket tires, the 33s. They are a little bit noisier compared to the tires in the 4Runner, but if I had the stock tires in this Land Cruiser, they would be just as quiet as the 4Runner tires. Toyota always does soft tires, soft, quiet tires from the factory for initial ride quality. I will say I do prefer the visibility over the hood with the Land Cruiser significantly more compared to the 4Runner. It's way easier to see over. Something that's kind of random, I like the gauge cluster on the 4Runner more, like the theme, but I prefer just this interior in general. Feels more premium. And again, I'm mentally thinking about a 4Runner TRD off-road premium, because that interior would be comparable to this, and still this feels more premium than even that. Okay, so we'll do the same thing. I'll lock the center differential here. See how long that takes. It's taken just as long as the 4Runner took to go into 4-wheel high. Pretty much, yeah, and that's fully locked. So it took just as long. But again, the benefit is on road with this, in my experience, because of Toyota's modern traction control system, you will never have to lock the center differential on road. You just won't have to. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. But yeah, just like a 4Runner, steering's a little bit heavier with the center diff locked. But doesn't really change all that much. Again, you get worse fuel economy. But overall, I mean, you look at the fuel economy figures, this is rated 22.25 with the hybrid. The 4Runner is 19.25 without the hybrid. So I don't know. I think that in the real world, the 4Runners, if people just drive them in two-wheel drive most of the time, which they will, I think they'll end up getting better fuel economy than Land Cruiser owners like myself. So, conclusion with this video. That was way quicker to turn off. Maybe it's because I was going around a corner. I don't know. That was really quick. So, conclusion with this video. The Land Cruiser full-time four-wheel drive system compared to the 4Runner part-time four-wheel drive system, right? Just the way that I see it is, or I should, a better way to, instead of saying part-time four-wheel drive, I feel like a better way to describe it is, I like saying traditional two-speed, two-wheel drive transfer case, because that fully describes what that 4Runner is, right? Because it has four-wheel drive low and everything. But anyways, language aside, I prefer the setup in the Land Cruiser in terms of the driving, because you don't really lose turning radius. It feels, again, from the seat of my pants, it feels pretty much the same with the center diff unlocked. But on top of that, right, I don't have to worry about going into four-wheel drive on road at all. I only have to worry about this system off-road, whereas the 4Runner, if it's snowy enough, if it's rainy enough, right, it's slick enough on the ground, you might have to pop it into four-wheel drive, and you have again, it's like with the center diff locked, right? You've got a really bad turning radius, and it fights you, right? I can't talk. The steering kicks back a little bit. So, but again, the fix to that is, instead of having it locked all the way, you just kind of slightly release, and again, you have a much worse turning radius, but you don't have the steering kickback with that. So I do prefer this system over the traditional two-wheel drive, two-speed transfer case that's in the 4Runner. But the 4Runner system is easy enough to use overall that I don't have any, I don't have any complaints or gripes with it, and so I would be fine. I guess the last thing to mention that I should have probably shown, this is easier to get in four-wheel drive low than the 4Runner, kind of. So with the 4Runner, you've got to put it in four-wheel drive high first to get it locked in four-wheel drive high, and then put it in low, whereas this, I can literally just, boom, I'm in four-wheel drive low. And then I can just, boom, and I'm in four-wheel drive auto. Like, this is a much quicker system to turn on and off with the four-wheel drive high and low, compared to the 4Runner, where you've got to go in to four-wheel high and then get into low, and then if you want to go back into two-wheel drive high, you got to go into high, get it out of low, and then into two-wheel drive. So it's a little bit more of a process with that too, but it's a more simplistic system. So there's kind of pros and cons. Fuel economy, simplicity on the side of the 4Runner, whereas this is a little bit more user-friendly, and especially if you're east of the Mississippi, where it's rainy all the time and you get ice and all of that, you might want to have full-time four-wheel drive, depending on how north your latitude is. Anyways, let me know your thoughts.